Okay, last part. I think we're in part 8, which would tie it for the longest video I've done. Yay me. Here's an irony for you. And I want you to think about this, folks. The more the left tries to create a society of like-minded, lemming-like automatons, which they are doing, the more tribal and polarized society becomes. Let me say it one more time. The more the left tries to create a society of like-minded, lemming-like automatons, the more tribal and polarized society becomes. Ipso facto. Let me explain how indoctrination works for those of you who think all this noise about who did what and people have a choice and they can't get out and they can get away from it, or it doesn't affect them poorly, or it's all a big right-wing conspiracy. Let me explain how indoctrination works step by step. So all of you doubters, naysayers, and progressives can eat crow and understand. Indoctrination is not merely pushing an opinion actively, but it is mostly disseminating ideas passively, but repeatedly, over and over, until an idea is taken as truth. It occurs in the absence of thinking. The thinking is done for you. Great example is how the mainstream media picks and chooses what they're going to tell you about the news so that you think the way they think. You don't have to think. They don't want you to research it. They don't want to give you two opinions and you decide which is the one that works for you. They give you one opinion and you're told the other opinion is crap and this is what you should follow. It is often done, indoctrination is often done unconsciously. Teachers simply pass along ideas to students without thinking. They become susceptible, willingly or unwillingly, to ideologies who intervene at this level by writing the script they become susceptible to ideologues, willingly or unwillingly, who intervene at this level by writing the script for teachers, which is how the LGBTQ advocacy and how anti-Semitic fabrication become part of the lessons in schools today. With use of Common Core, pervasive relativism in education is brought about. Mastery of a subject matter is gone. Knowledge becomes subjective. Thinking is only the articulation of opinion. It has no bearing on truth. You no longer have to think critically to believe what you believe. Having the right viewpoint and forcing others to conform is everything. The one with the loudest voice is, after all, the winner, because no one else's opinion is better than anyone else's. Pressure, but not persuade. This leads to tribalism. People united behind a common opinion, but not united in reason or in truth. These groups are vulnerable to conventional wisdom and mass media. Indoctrination is complete when perception, i.e., whatever is on TV, whatever an expert says, whatever is popular, really does become reality for most people, because they're too stupid or apathetic to respond rationally. Now, if that got past you a little bit, I would urge you to rewind and look at that one again. Indoctrination is real, folks. And it is surprisingly powerful. You do not hear loud screams from the left about right-wing ideology in education, because there is none. The only complaints come from concerned teachers, students, and from the right about the left. They are the only ones propagating this mass delusion. And it all started from when we decided to use psychology, behavioral psychology, and apply it to education some 120 years ago. And when we started to do that, we started to treat children like lab rats, all with the agenda in mind. You heard it right from Dewey's own mouth in his own books. His idea was to create utopia. And what better way to do that, than experimentally anyway, than with children? And I've also posited that there's another equally nefarious reason that the left is trying to indoctrinate our children by means of omitting certain things in books historically, revising history to make the Republicans or the right look bad and the Democrats or the left look good, by altering the wording of the Constitution to make it sound like the liberals were right after all, and the conservatives are wrong-headed. There's a reason for all this. And it has to do with the same reason that the liberals do basically anything. The progressives, the radicals want power. And they want to keep power. And the best way to have power, to get power, and to keep power is to make sure that people vote for them. How do you get them to vote for them? Well, it used to be done by trying to convince them in the face of opposite or an opposing viewpoint. And when, of course, their ideas became more and more radical, debating those ideas in front of an opposing viewpoint became a losing proposition, because truth and reason and history and facts beat out this emotional plea for utopianism. And so they all retreated back into their little holes and their little caves where they came from and came out with a new idea. Let's get the children. Instead of trying to convince adults to vote for them, why don't we have the children indoctrinated into left-wing, collectivist, statist, totalitarian, left-wing thinking from as early an age as we can possibly get at them, so that by the time they are of voting age, they already are like-minded. We don't have, all the hard work is done. We don't have to convince anybody of anything. They're already going to pull that lever for the guy with or the woman with the D next to his name, no matter what. And the more radical, the better. They're already going to cry out for failed ideas like socialism and communism. And we won't have to convince them of anything. They feel like they're part of this big, vast, giant group of people who must be right because we have the might and we have the numbers, because we have all the cultural megaphones, the mainstream media, Hollywood, music industry, professors in school, politics on the left have a backstop, and they're the loudest voices. So we want to be with part of this human nature. I want to be part of the majority. And it sounds like the conventional wisdom, and the majority is all on the left. And as a kid, I'm very susceptible to that. As a young adult, I'm kind of, most people are kind of vulnerable to being ostracized, bullied, part of a minority, part of a marginalized group. And so they are naturally drawn to the majority, the conventional wisdom, the loud speakers, the ones that are in your face all the time, the repeated left-wing propaganda on TV shows, in music, in the media. And they know that. Get them when they're impressionable. Get them when their minds are mush. Get them where the job is so much easier than some hardened adult who's living a life of paying taxes and having to raise a family and having to work in a job where there is less of a democracy and more of a conservative mindset is required to survive. Get it where your job is easier. Nothing more insidious, folks, than the liberals trying to educate our kids for purposes of maintaining their power in the future. These kids will grow up to become good little socialists, communists, whatever. Good little progressives who do what they were taught to do whenever something right-wing or honest or truthful or historically accurate or factual comes along. Stick their fingers in their ear and scream while that information is being passed to them. And when it's all done and the sound is clear, the coast is clear, they can go on in their happy little bubbles believing what they believe. I repeat again what Ronald Reagan said. It's not that liberals are stupid, it's just that they know so much that isn't so. And why is it that they know so much that isn't so? It's because they've been taught so much that isn't so. I urge you as parents, as students, as anybody who's concerned, our future generations are at stake. The millennials have had their fill of this. The Gen Zers are up to their necks in it. The first generations of kids, wholly and totally indoctrinated, have come out of the school systems. And they walk around our streets dumb as they can be, functionally illiterate, uneducated in what we used to think was important: civics, economics, certain languages, certain history, historical facts, math, science, reading. Schools are seemingly oblivious to the problem. And the solve is always more money, more tests, more government control. The NEA, which has its hand in every liberal cookie jar it possibly can, promoting as much liberalism and progressivism and statism as it possibly can upon teachers and students. It never ends. Imagine, I personally cannot imagine, when I was in school in the 70s and early 80s, we had some teachers who you would say, yeah, they're a little left of center. One teacher was a PE teacher, and he taught English or something, and when John Lennon died, he was passing out flyers about how great John Lennon was and all this other stuff. But that's nothing. I mean, it's mild. I had another teacher he was all about make sure that the kids had the free speech held up, and would support them when they were in trouble with the school, when they wanted to have clubs with names on it. Oh, they're gangs. You're not allowed to similar names on your shirts. He was a complete lib, but he understood the Constitution. Again, not as bad as today. I could never imagine students being ostracized and called out by teachers, no less, the way we had documented here in the earlier video today. It is unconscionable what the left is doing to our kids today. It's so empty and hollow hearing a liberal talk about how kids are bullied in school. Apparently certain kinds of bullying is perfectly okay, but other kinds, apparently not. They get to cherry pick the kind of bullying they're for, and you don't hear a peep. The mainstream media doesn't talk about it at all. Not a peep. Why? Because they agree with it. They have no problem with kids growing up to be good little progressives like them. However it happens, the end justifies the means. So, to conclude, I'll just say this. Be aware. If you see something, say something. Let a trusted teacher, principal know what's going on in your class if you're a student. Tell your parents. Parents, let the school boards know you're not happy. Go to meetings. Cry out. Hue and cry like the liberals do with everything else. It's about time we got outraged by what they're doing to our children and how they're being taught. Otherwise, the future generations, this country will be lost. As we compare ourselves to other nations, where back in the 40s and 50s, we used to stand out. Number one in the world, or in the top 5 in math, education, in science, and in other things. Now we're dropping and dropping and dropping compared to other civilized countries. We're 5th, we're 12th, we're 20th, and going down. This is not coincidental, folks. We did not suddenly suck at education when once we were the envy of the world by accident. Do the math. Follow the history. There is no such thing as coincidences. There's a reason we're suffering the way we're suffering, and our kids are suffering the way they're suffering. It's called progressivism, liberalism, left-wing ideology, statism, Marxism. Call it what you will. That is the problem. It has always been the problem. It always will be the problem. And if you liberals and progressives want to poo-poo that and close your ears and scream while this is being told, knock yourselves out. But we're coming for you. We're calling you out, and we're going to save the kids you say you're for. No, you're not for them. You want to control them. You want to own them. You want to enslave them. Well, that's nothing new for a liberal. Slavery is your bag, man. See you on the next one.